Okay, so welcome back. For this video, I'm going to sort of free-form animate the logo that you see happening in front of you here. We're going to make the circle sort of bounce. We're going to have the stars kind of animate out. Type is just going to use opacity to come in, and those wings are going to kind of fall backwards. We're going to do this. I'm going to do this free-form. So feel free to stop the video at any point if you're ready to try it on your own, or you can watch the whole video and then try it, or you can try to do step by step along with me. But so let's dive right in. First thing that you always have to do is you need to figure out where everything is. You have a lot of layers in After Effects, and so it's always good to just kind of go through and look. Okay, we got all the text on one layer. Okay, sometimes you might want to separate that, but in this case, for simplicity, I put it all on one layer. We got the airplane. While I got the airplane, let's go check its anchor point, and the anchor point's not showing up. So this is our first sort of what the heck's going on moment. It turns out when I set up my file here, I accidentally clicked the toggle mask and shape path visibility button, which means most of the time you're going to want that on. You want that to be blue right here. But that's just, I must have hit that by accident. And so if you ever that happens to you, just make sure you click that tiny little button there. And now you can see my anchor point is right there in the dead center. That's going to be no problem. I have all these little stars. And you might notice there's some extra stuff around those stars. I did a little cheat when I brought this in, as I just duplicated those 6 stars and then put a mask around it. And we'll talk about masks at a later date. And then we got the circle, which we're going to animate first, and we got our wings. So to kind of isolate just that circle, I'm going to just turn the eyeballs off of everything but the circle. And I'm going to kind of, I want everything to be animated in within like a second. This is going to be a fast animation. So I'm going to hit scale, S for scale, and click a keyframe for where I want my circle to end. I want it to be at 100% right there because everything's already lined up with it. And I'll just work backwards from 0. Now, I often will do opacity and scale, because if you scale from 0, it just kind of magically appears. It just like, bam, it's there. So sometimes I like to throw in a little opacity, bring opacity down, and just as it's kind of coming up from nowhere, have it scale pretty quickly up to 100%. So that way there's maybe a little bit more of a distance. So there's just a couple frames where it's not 100% opaque. All right, so we got, okay, so you can preview that. And what's nice is, again, set your work area. So you can just preview that over and over again, and that's really slow. We want this to pop. So I'm just going to bring my scale position keyframes in. Try again. Okay, a little bit quicker maybe. There you go. I think that works. But I don't want it to come in and sit. I want it to kind of bounce a little bit. So we're going to have the scale kind of go wang, that official technique there. So instead of coming up to 100, I'm just going to overscale it just a tad. You're not going to notice that it's overly pixelated because it's going to be blurry with some motion blur. So I'm going to go overboard and then come back to maybe 86 and then 102. Just going to bounce back and forth. Finally one less, and then finally to 100. All right, so the scale, you can see it's just going to go back and forth. And there's always going to take some adjustment. You can say, no, it's not happening fast enough. So let me move all these keyframes a little closer together. And in later videos and in later techniques, you'll see that there's lots of different types of keyframes we can use. But I'm going to do this pretty straightforward. Not going to introduce any new concepts into this demonstration. There we go. Just took a little bit of adjustment. One more. Maybe slow it down so it kind of bounces fast, and then, something like that. A little too much at the end. Okay, so it just took a little going back and forth with scale to get that circle exactly what we want. And then from there, let's do the airplane. So as this is kind of bouncing in, we're going to have the airplane, again, with the scale and rotation. So I'm going to hit S and then Shift R to bring up rotation. And of course, I'm going to click my keyframes because it's already in position and work backwards. Ooh, and probably opacity as well. Might as well kind of fade that in kind of quickly. All right, and scale from 0, and we'll just watch that. All right, so that comes in pretty quick. That's good. But maybe we want it to rotate at the same time, so I'll right now my rotation is, I'll go ahead and move this keyframe here, so it's 0 rotation, and then it's going to rotate. You know, we want it probably clockwise, so I'm just going to hit probably 1 time. We don't want it to go too far. There we go. And you know, sometimes maybe we want it to, well, in this case I think we're going to have it rotate, finish rotation and scale at the same time. Okay, in future videos you might do some easy ease just to kind of smooth that out, but for now we'll leave that alone. There you go, that works. Alright, you should be saving all along at the same time. I'm not, but I'm living dangerously. Now I have all these stars that we want to sort of animate from behind the tail here. So I'm just going to turn them all on, and I'm going to do a little trick. I'm going to hold down Shift and click all my stars and hit P and Shift T. And what's nice about that, you can see, there you go, just do a readjustment. Now we can pull up a lot of properties for all those layers at the same time. I'm going to click off those so I don't select all of them at the same time. And again, we want position, all of our position keyframes around that time. So now we'll work back. So it's right when it hits is when I want the stars to come out. And I'll zoom in so it's a little easier to grab them. So I'll just grab these stars. And if I hold down Shift, you can see it snaps to a straight line. Oops. Sometimes it's just because the way layers are, if you try to grab a layer in the composition window, it'll grab something else. Like in this case, it's grabbing the airplane every time I try to grab a star. I can either lock the airplane or I can just go and grab the star this way. All right, same thing here. Grab these. Alright, and then while we're here, we'll do opacity. We just want it to fade in because you don't want those stars to show up before we want them. So just bring all the opacity down. So we have a, you know, you do this a lot, these little quick fade ins, just so you don't see anything kind of pop. There we go. So it's just going to fade in and then animate. And if I, you know, well, we'll just see what happens. We might want to offset those keyframes so they're not exactly perfect. There you go. Let's just see what that looks like. Okay, a little slow. So let's bring in those keyframes. Usually, if you're brand new to After Effects, you tend to do things a little bit too slow. Everything happens fast with motion graphics. You want things to pop, you want your animations to overlap, so you never have anything just sort of dead on the screen. Let's just look at that a couple times. Yeah, I kind of like that. Alright, and then it looks like our last thing is our type. And with type, we're going to keep this simple and just use opacity, or T for topacity. And that's going to come in at the end because we don't want to have to bounce that text. So right as that star's coming in, we'll overlap 0 to 100. And I think we got it. We're not going to do the shine that you saw in the other example. That's actually an animated mask. It's really easy to do, but it's out of the scope of this video or this example. Yeah, I think that works. Now, last little thing to add a little more realism. When something moves quickly, the way our eye perceives it, it creates a little motion blur. A little blur. If you wave your hand in front of your face, it's going to blur the faster it goes. So this little switch right here, and if it's not there, if for some reason you see this by accident, just click the little toggle switch. But I'm just going to turn on motion blur to all my moving layers. Oh, you know what? We forgot the wings. Well, we'll go ahead and do motion blur first, and then we'll add the wings at the very end. Okay, so now you can see, look at that little bit of blur. The faster it moves, you get this nice blurriness to it that then snaps once it stops moving. Yeah, much better. All right, so let's do those wings. Forgot about the wings. Turn those back on. And again, just like everything else, we're going to use rotation and probably transparency to hide those wings until we want them to appear, because you can see they're there from the beginning. So we'll set we want it probably right as the text comes out. So I'm going to set rotation and transparency or opacity. Back that off a little bit. So that way they appear. They're going to appear from behind and then rotate in. Looks like my anchor points need to be set, so I'll grab my pan behind tool and just move. Oops, helps if I select the layer. There we go. Just need to move my anchor point, so now it just will kind of fold in rather than rotating. Like if I grab this one, you'll see it just rotates around the center. So I'll just, again, do the same thing to this one. Just rotate from there. I'll pull this out just for a second so I can see it. There. All right, from different directions. Then I'll bring my transparency keyframes back so that way it doesn't show up. Okay, plus maybe I think that rotate a little bit so their transparency fades in quickly. There we go. I think that'll do it. Yeah. So again, with After Effects, it's all about, previewing, really watching it, seeing what works, what doesn't, and just manipulating those keyframes. If you get a little frustrated, just nuke the keyframe and then start over. Sometimes it's easier just to delete everything on a set of keyframes and try again if you get a little bit lost in the beginning. But the more you do this, the more you'll be able to read these keyframes and the quicker you'll get. Go for it.